Am I audible to all of you? Just write in the chat box. Okay. So I am sharing my today's presentation slide. Just a minute. So in the last class, we already started uh, the demand forecasting topic under demand analysis. So we already started it, and we we discussed its definition and why demand forecasting is needed, and also we studied the demand forecasting and its 5 essential steps. So this we discussed in our last class. These are the 5 essential steps we already discussed in our last class, and its recording is already available in the college YouTube channel. You can refer this topic from that recorded video. So in today's class, we are going to start uh, a new topic related to demand forecasting, and it is the purpose and objectives of demand forecasting. So I am just elaborating, I am just enlarging this slide so that it is visible, much more visible to all of you. Just a minute. Now the purpose and objectives of demand forecasting. So the objectives of demand forecasting is categorized into two forms. So first is the short-term objectives, and the second is the long-term objectives, and they are further divided into basically the short-term objectives are further divided into 4 categories. The first is formulating production policy, then formulating price policy, then controlling sales, and last is arranging finance. And the long-term objectives are further divided into deciding the production capacity and then planning long-term activities. So let us discuss these in detail one by one. So moving to the next slide. So we are first discussing the short-term objectives. So there are 4 in numbers. So these are the 4 short-term objectives. So let us discuss the first short-term objective, which is formulating production policy. So it helps in covering the gap between the demand and the supply of the product. So as its name suggests, we are going to take the production policy into consideration here. So it helps in covering the gap between the demand and the supply of the product. So the demand forecasting helps in estimating the requirement of the raw material which is required in future, so that the regular supply of raw material can be maintained. So whatever whatever quantity is demanded, that much quantity must be supplied. So it further helps in maximum utilization of resources, as operations are planned according to forecast. So basically the forecast deals with the future expectation. So in that case, we need to decide what what will be the demand of that particular item in the future, and according to that the supply of that item will be maintained. So in order to maximize the utilization of resources, uh, we can uh, we can adjust the demand and the supply. So similarly, human resource requirements are easily met with the help of demand forecasting. So the manual power which is required by the company in order to perform its operation has to be uh, has to be taken into account while considering the production policy. So this is the first division of short term analysis. Then moving to the next slide, the next point is formulating price policy. So first is for formulating production policy, then the next is this is formulating price policy. So it refers to one of the most important objectives of demand forecasting. So an organization sets prices of its products according to their demand. So for example, if an economy enters into depression or recession phase, the demand for product falls. As we already they see in the case of coronavirus. So in such a case, the organization sets low prices of its product. So the organization is constantly uh, uh, looking into the market whether the sale of its item is constantly increasing or depressing in that price, and according to that the organization sets the price of that product. So as the market is going to recession, then in that case the organization sets low price of its product. So this is the second factor of short term analysis. Now moving to the next slide. The third factor is controlling sales. So it helps in setting sales target. So which act as a basis for evaluating sales performance. So organization has decided in advance its target for the month, then quarterly target, then yearly target, and on the basis of the uh, on the basis of the target, they are keep on analyzing whether the target is achieved or not. So basically, the organization makes demand forecast for different regions and fits sales target for each region accordingly. And based on different region, the target can be different. So the third factor is controlling sales. Now moving to the next slide, and and this and this is the last factor for short term analysis. This is the arranging finance. So it implies that the financial requirements of the enterprise are estimated with the help of demand forecasting. So this helps in ensuring proper liquidity within the organization. Suppose the demand for a particular product is increasing over a period of time, then the organization needs to uh, needs to produce that item in a much more larger quantity. For that it needs financial assistance from different organization or different stakeholders. So in that case, it needs financial assistance uh, for running their organization. So the arranging finance is also an important factor, which is a short-term analysis factor. So these are the four important short-term analysis factors. Now moving to the next slide. Now come the long-term objectives. So here we have two long-term objectives. First is deciding the production capacity and planning long-term activities. So these are the long-term objectives for an organization. So first, let us discuss these objectives in detail. So moving to the next slide. So first is deciding the production capacity. So it implies that with the help of demand forecasting, an organization can determine the size of the plant required for production. So if an organization needed to produce more items, then it needs to have much more infrastructure in order to produce those items in that particular time span. uh, so so the production capacity will going to be increased. The second point is the size of the plant should conform to the sales requirement of the organization. So as the sales requirement as the sales of as the sales of the items are increased, then the size of the plant will going to be increased, because much more number of items are going to be produced. So this is the long term activity for an organization. Now moving to the next slide. Now, the second factor for long term activity is planning long term activities. So, it implies that demand forecasting helps in planning for long term. For example, if the forecasted demand for the organization's product is high, then it may plan to invest in various expansion and development projects in the long term. So basically, if the demand of the products produced by the company or the organization is high, then obviously it demands it need to supply, or it need to produce much more product. Then in that case, the organization needs a long term activity to plan for producing those items or products. So this concludes the purpose of demand forecasting. So all of you are getting it, just write in the chat box so that we can move further to the next topic, since some students are waiting in the lobby. Okay, so moving to the next slide. So the next topic is determinants of demand forecasting. So as you can see here, there are 8 determinants which define the demand forecasting, or in other words, the demand forecasting is basically dependent on these 8 factors. So these are the names written of the determinants of demand forecasting. So first is prevailing business conditions, then conditions within the industry, then condition within the firm. As you can see here, industry and firm are different. So the conditions uh, of both are different. Then the fourth factor is factors affecting export trade. Then the fifth is market behavior. Then sixth condition is, or the sixth determinant is sociological condition. Then seventh determinant is psychological condition, and the eighth is competitive conditions. So these are the 8 determinants of demand forecasting. So let us discuss each of these determinants one by one in the next slides. So moving to the next slide. So first determinant of demand forecasting is prevailing business conditions. So while preparing demand forecast, it becomes necessary to study the general economic conditions very carefully, because we are planning the demand forecasting for an organization. So the organization need to study the general economic conditions very carefully. So these include the price level changes, changes in national income, per capita income, consumption pattern of the consumer, savings and investment habits of the consumer, employment status of the country, etc. So these are the factors on which the business conditions are dependent. So this is the first determinant of demand forecasting. So moving to the next slide. So the next condition is condition within the industry. So every business enterprise is only a unit of a particular industry. Uh, So as you can have like a textile industry is here in Bhilwara, then there are small business enterprises which are related to the textile industry. So sales of that business enterprise means uh, that particular organization or that particular company are only a part of the total sales of that industry. Means all the small organization or all the small companies are contributed to the textile industry. So therefore, while preparing demand forecast for a particular business enterprise, it becomes necessary to study the changes in the demand of the whole industry. So so basically, in order to make the demand forecast of a small company, you need to have a large picture related to the whole industry. So number of units within the industry, design and quality of the product which are being used in those in the current time or in future, then the price policy, then competition within the industry. So these factors need to be taken into account while making the demand while making the demand forecasting within the industry. So these factors need to be taken into account. So this is the second determinant. Now moving to the next slide. Now the third determinant is conditions within the firm. So internal factors of the firm also affect the demand forecasting. So here we are talking about a particular firm or a particular company. So these factors include plant capacity of the firm. It means some companies of having a small infrastructure and some company are having a large infrastructure. And the quality of the product, then the price of the product, advertising and distribution policies of that particular firm, then production policies, then financial policies. So these are the factor which is particular to the firm or the company. So this is the third determinant of demand forecasting. Now moving to the next slide. Now the fourth determinant is factors affecting export trade. So if a firm is engaged in export trade also, it should consider the factors affecting the export trade. So these factors include import and export control, terms and conditions of export, foreign trade policies, export conditions, export finance, etc. So only some big companies or firms are dealing with the export. They need to satisfy the foreign trade policy, export conditions, export finance in order to export their product uh, to the different regions of the country or even to abroad. So this is the fourth determinant of demand forecasting. So moving to the next slide. Now the fifth determinant is market behavior. So while preparing demand forecast, it is required to consider the market behavior which brings about changes in demand. So obviously, the market condition need to be taken into account while making the demand forecast for a particular company or a firm. So this is the fifth determinant of demand forecasting. Now the sixth determinant is sociological conditions. So sociological factors have their own impact on demand forecasting of a company. So basically the sociological factors are dependent on the society. So these conditions relate to the size of the population, density, changes in the age group, size of the family, family life cycle, level of education, family income, social awareness, etc. So these factors are very much important for a society, or these are basically much more related to the area in which the company wants to sell its product. So all these factors are considered here. The family income of that region, or the social awareness of the people of that city. So all these factor needs to be considered in the case of social conditions. So this is the sixth factor uh, of demand forecasting. Now moving to the next slide. The next determinant is psychological conditions. So, while estimating the demand for the product, it becomes necessary to take into consideration such factors as changes in consumer taste, habits, fashions, likes and dislikes, of the consumer, the attitudes of the consumer, the perceptions, the lifestyle of the consumers. So all these factors comes under the psychological conditions. So these need to be taken into account while forecasting, while demand forecasting for the products or the items. So this is the seventh determinant of demand forecasting. Now moving to the next slide. Now, the last determinant is competitive conditions. The competitive condition within the industry may change. So, the competitors may enter into the market or go out of market. So, a demand forecast prepared without considering the activities of competitors may not be correct. So, so the organization or the firm need to make their demand forecasting also considering their competitors which are already present in the market. So this is very important determinant. So so this concludes the topic determinants of demand forecasting. So all of you understand it. These are the 8 determinants of demand forecasting. Just write in the chat box so that we can move to the next topic. Okay. Now the last topic of demand analysis and the last topic of demand forecasting is methods of demand forecasting. So there are several methods of demand forecasting applied in terms of the purpose of forecasting, data required, data availability, and the time frame within which the demand is to be forecast. So these are the 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 conditions on which the different methods are proposed for demand forecasting. So each method varies from one another, and hence the forecaster must select that method which best suits the requirement. So moving to the next slide. So the methods are basically categorized into two major categories. So first is survey methods and the second is statistical methods. Further, the survey methods are categorized into consumer survey and opinion poll methods, and the statistical methods are further categorized into projection, barometric method, and econometric methods. But the major categories of methods of demand forecasting are the survey methods and the statistical methods. So let us discuss the survey method first. So moving to the next slide. So survey methods. So under the survey method, the consumers are directly contacted and are asked about their intentions for a product in their future purchase plans. So as you know that there are many surveys are conducted. There are many household surveys are conducted by different agencies in order to know the consumers, uh, the consumers liking and dislikings. So this method is often used when the forecasting of a demand is to be done for a short period of time. So this method is basically useful in case of short period of time, if a survey is conducted in a short period of time. So moving to the next slide. So then comes the consumer survey method. So it is one of the techniques of demand forecasting that involves direct interview of the potential consumers. So the surveyor asked some questions to the consumer about their likings and dislikings. So the consumer survey method includes the further methods that can be used to interview the consumer. So the further methods are complete enumeration method and the sample survey method. So these are the two uh, methods which are adopted by the adopted in the consumer survey. So let us discuss each of these method in detail in the next slide. So moving to the next slide. So first is complete enumeration method. So under this method, a forecaster contacts almost all the potential users of the product and ask them about their future purchase plans. So the probable demand for a product can be obtained by adding all the quantities indicated by the consumer. So such as the majority of children in a city, so this is the example, such as the majority of the children in a city report that the quantity of the chocolate, which is denoted as Q, they are willing to purchase, then the total probable demand for the chocolate can be determined as this. Suppose a particular chocolate demand has been given by some children. Suppose a Q1 demand is being demanded by a first child, then Q2 demand is has been demanded by second child, then Q3, and up to Qn demand has been demanded by the nth child. So according to we are adding all the demands and then the probable demand has been evaluated. But the limitation of this method is that it can only be applied when the consumers are contracted in a certain region or locality. So only a short survey has been conducted here because a certain uh, region or locality has been taken in this method. So the consumer might not know their actual demand in future. So that's why they are conducted the survey. So by this is the example of the chocolate by which is using this method, the complete enumeration method. You already know the enumeration. method which is being used in the C programming. So we are just incrementing it. So just remember the enumeration word, and here also we are just enumerating it by taking all the persons in the survey into account. So moving to the next method. So next method is the sample survey method. So the sample survey method is often used when the target population are more. So only the sample of potential consumer is selected for the interview. So a sample of consumer is selected through a sampling method. So here the method of survey may be direct interview or mailed questionnaire to the selected sample consumer. So both methods can be taken into account here. A direct interview can be done, or a questionnaire can be mailed to the consumer. So the probable demand indicating the response of the consumer can be estimated using this formula. So this is the formula for calculating the probable demand through this method. So here DP has been determining the probable demand forecast, and here HR means number of household reporting demand for a product. Then HS, which is at the bottom, HS is the number of household surveyed or sample household. Then H is the census number of household from the relevant market, and then AD is the average expected consumption of by the reporting household. So AD can also be calculated as the total quantity consumed by the reporting household upon number of household. So this is the formula for calculating the probable demand by using the sample survey. You just need to remember this formula while answering this question. So moving to the next slide. Now the sample survey method is less costly and even less time consuming as compared to the comprehensive survey method. The sample survey method is often used to estimate a short-run demand of business firm, household, government agencies who plan their future purchases. So, however, the major limitation of this method is that a forecaster cannot contribute more reliability to the forecast than warrant. So basically the sample survey method is less costly and less time consuming. So this method are much more used than the comprehensive survey method. So moving to the next slide. Now the next method of the survey method is the opinion poll method. So they are used to collect opinions of those who possesses the knowledge about the market, such as the sales representative, professional market expert, sales executive, and marketing consultants. So their opinion has to be considered while considering the demand forecasting. So three methods comes under the opinion poll method. So first is the expert opinion method, second is the Delphi method, and the third is the market studies and experiment. So let us discuss each of these methods in detail. So moving to the next slide. So first we consider the expert opinion method. So here the companies with an adequate network of sales representatives can capitalize on them in assessing the demand for a target product in a particular region or locality that they represent. So basically the company decided to sell its product in a particular region or locality. So it hires sales representatives first in order to determine the demand of that item in that particular locality. So since sales representatives are in direct touch with the consumer, are supposed to know the future purchase plans of their consumers, their preferences for the product, their reactions to the introduction of a new product, their reactions to the market change, and the demand for rival products. So the sales representative can find out the answers from the consumers about these important questions. So moving to the next slide. So although this method is too simple and inexpensive, it suffers from serious limitations. So these are the limitations of expert opinion method. The first is the extent to which the estimates provided by the sales representatives or professionals are reliable depends on their skills and expertise to analyze the market and their experience. So it depends on each individual sales representative skills and their knowledge about that industry or product. Now, the second is there are chances of over or underestimation of demand due to the subjective judgment of the assessor. So, many a times you also know that if a sales executive comes uh, in your house, inquiry about a particular item, then many a times the people give give him wrong information. So if that is the case, then uh, chances of overestimation of demand or underestimation of demand is much more likely. So this is the limitation of expert opinion method. Then the third limitation is the evaluation of market demand is often based on inadequate information available to the sales representative, since they have a narrow view of the market. Because sales representative basic task is to deal with the consumer, and it does not know much about the market or how the business has been uh, or how the business has been done by the organization, or where to where to enhance the items in the market or not. The sales representative has much less knowledge about this. So this method is having much more limitations than the advantages. So moving to the next slide. Now next comes the Delphi method. So this is the second method, comes under the opinion poll method. So this method is the extension of the expert opinion method, wherein the divergent expert opinions are consolidated to estimate a future demand. So the process of Delphi technique is very simple. So under this method, the experts are provided with the information related to estimate the forecast of other experts along with the underlying assumptions. So here the expert need to forecast the other expert opinion. So the expert can revise their estimate in the light of the demand forecast made by the other group of expert. So the consensus of the expert regarding the forecast result in the final forecast. So only 5 minutes are remaining. So we need to just complete this topic. So at last, in the Delphi method, the census of expert regarding the forecast results in the final forecast. So in this method, a group of different experts are being organized, and the first group of expert then analyze the result of the second group of expert, and based on this, they even change their their first analysis report, and based on the analysis report of different groups of experts, the final forecast has been made. So this is the advantage of the Delphi method, and this is the extension of expert opinion method. So by adopting Delphi method, the chances of uh, uh, good demand forecasting can be made by the organization. So moving to the next slide. Now the third method which comes under the opinion poll method is market studies and experiments. So under this method, a firm selects some areas of representative markets such as 3 or 4 cities having the similar characteristics in terms of population, income levels, social and cultural backgrounds, choices and preferences of consumers, and occupational distribution. So here the organization need to identify 3 or 4 cities or even more which have the same characteristics and same group of population. So then the market experiments are carried out by changing the prices, advertisement expenditure, and all other controllable factors under the demand function, other things remaining the same. So once these changes are introduced into the market, the consequent changes in the demand for a product are recorded. So on the basis of these recorded estimates, the elasticity coefficients are calculated, which we already discussed, the demand elasticity coefficients, and these computed coefficients along with the demand function variables are used to access the future demand for the product. So by doing this exercise, the market studies and experiments are being conducted by the organization in different cities and different regions of the country in order to demand forecast. So this concludes the survey method. So next comes the statistical method. So only 2 minutes are remaining. So we will discuss this topic in the next class. So all of you understand it. Just write in the next. Just write in the chat box. So you already know that your midterm exam date was declared. So unit 1 and unit 2 are coming in your midterm examination. Okay. So now today's class is completed. We will going to start the next class with a statistical method. Now thank you very much. Now you can leave this meeting.